Hello, friends of Airtable, friends of the no-code space, low-code space, sometimes even full code space. Whatever friends you are, welcome to this video. Today I would like to show you how you can automate your UpWork job search completely for free if you have an Airtable Pro account. If you don't have a Pro account, wait to the end of the video where I show you what you can do if, let's say, you have a free account in Airtable. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I've written down a bit of an outline here. The first thing we want to do is we want to search for a job on UpWork, and select an RSS feed from UpWork. Conveniently, UpWork provides us with an RSS feed, which we're going to use later on. Then we take that RSS feed and we turn it into a JSON feed, because that's what we can work with in Airtable scripts. And then we fetch that data in Airtable and we create the records. Sounds pretty straightforward. And then there's a little bit of a bonus, and that is how to fetch manually, not automatically, if you don't have an Airtable Pro account, which is okay, but then you can't automate stuff. At least you can't automate using scripts. So let's start with number one, which is we want to search for a job on UpWork and select the RSS feed. I'm here on UpWork, and I have a free account, so you don't need a paid account or anything for this. And let's say I am interested in content writing jobs. So there are a lot of content writing jobs on UpWork, of course. 598, sorry. And let's say we're an expert and we're only interested in those with less than 5 proposals. And let's say we are interested in those that have an hourly rate of at least $50. So this narrows it down to 163 jobs, which is good. At the bottom of the page, we can actually select how many jobs we want to display per page. And we say we want to have 50 jobs. Up here, we can select our RSS feed. An RSS feed looks like this. So we click on it, it opens up, an XML version of it opens up. And here's basically all the data in a somewhat structured format of all these 50 jobs that we found here on this page. We can't use that right away. We kind of have to convert it into a JSON feed. It makes it a lot easier for us to work with it. JSON is just another way of structuring data, basically, and like a standard for structuring data, so to say. And I found a tool online, which is pretty cool, which is called Convert. You can find the link here, and I'll make sure to add this in the notes, of course, where you can convert an RSS feed into a JSON feed. So we have here our link, we grab it. And by the way, this link always stays the same and is always going to be unique for whatever you're selecting here on UpWork. So whenever there's a new job, it's going to include those new jobs as well. At least in our case, it's going to include the latest 50 jobs that we searched for. In our case, for these content writing jobs. So we take the URL, we paste this in here, we say convert, and we get something which is a JSON object. So this looks already a bit more structured. You can see these items here, and these items have a title and so on. So this looks pretty good. Also, this link isn't going to change. So it's a permanent link that we can now always use in Airtable in order to automate fetching, because we use the fetch API, fetching jobs. I'm here in Airtable. I've already created a base, which are called UpWork jobs. Base has one table, jobs, pretty straightforward. 3 fields, job title, URL, and date published. The URL is pretty important because we want to click on it to see the job, of course, but it's also the unique identifier. So it's also basically how we determine whether when we are fetching new jobs via the RSS feed or via the JSON feed, how we determine whether that job already exists. So it's very important to have sort of a unique identifier. We go in automations. I've already created like a template here, which is called fetch jobs from UpWork, and create those records. We run this every 15 minutes, which is basically the most frequent schedule we can set in Airtable. And then every 15 minutes, we run a script. And the script basically is where the magic happens, of course, is where we grab the data and create the record if that job doesn't exist yet. Because if we check every 15 minutes, and we have, let's go back to UpWork, only 163 jobs in total, we grab the latest 50, you see, like there are still jobs which were 5 days ago posted, 6 days ago, 7 days ago. So we're gonna have like, we're gonna grab the same jobs again and again. We just have to make sure not to create them as well. So let's go into our code editor. I've written a little bit of an outline here. So the first thing we want to do is grab the JSON feed. And how we do that is with the fetch API, basically a JavaScript fetch API, which gives back a response. And we have to do this with an await, so asynchronously, and then we say fetch. We need this, and then in here we paste our link. So this is the link we grab from here. So this is the JSON object or the JSON feed that we created on that website that we saw before. Let's console log that response to see how that looks like. And we get something back. That's pretty good. We get a status 200 back. Status 200 basically means is good, is success. But what we're seeing here, we can't really work with that. So actually what we need to do is we need to parse that JSON data. And this works like this in JavaScript, but we also have to await that. And if we parse that JSON, we get something else back. And this looks a lot better. In fact, it looks exactly like what we saw in the browser before. We get a big object back, and this object has like an object again and an array here, an array of items, 50 items. That's pretty good because that's exactly those 50 items that we found on UpWork. So this is what we're going to work with. Now I said second save result. What do I mean is, I mean result await response dot JSON. So instead of console logging this, I actually want to save it in something. Third is I want to save the jobs array. What do I mean by that? I mean this array of items. So I say const jobs array is result dot items. And let's console log this to make sure it actually looks good. Does it look good? We should get an array of 50 items. And we do. That's pretty good. So let's look at these. It's actually like an array of objects, of 50 objects. So let's look at these objects. They have something which is called GUID, which is an abbreviation, stands for Generally Unique Identifier, I think, or Global Unique Identifier. We have a URL, we have a title, we have some content, we have a date published. Pretty good. In this case, like the identifier and the URL are pretty much the same. Yeah, I think they look exactly the same, which is good because we're only going to use the URL. So the idea is now, let me clean up a bit here. The idea is now to basically loop over that jobs array, determine whether that job already exists in the table, and if it does not exist, then we create it. If it does already exist, we don't create it, of course. So what we need to do there for that is we need to see which records are already present in the table at the current moment. So we need to load the table records. So we define new variable jobs table, which is base get table jobs. We always need to query for the records. So we say jobs dot select records async. Actually, this we have to wait. And we're not interested in all fields on those records. We're only interested in the field URL because that's the only thing we want to compare, basically. We want to loop over the jobs array. Want to check whether the URL of that job already exists in the table. How do we do that? I think there are many ways of doing that, but I think a very good way is using JavaScript includes method. And basically includes checks whether an array has a certain items in it. In order to do that, we need to create an array of the URL items, so an array of all URLs that are currently present in our table. So I want to call this unique URLs, and for that I'm going over the jobs query over the records, and I'm saying .map. So basically maps takes an array and spits out an array of the same size. In here we have records, so I say rec get cell value URL. This creates an array with only URLs, basically. I think console logging doesn't lead anywhere now because there's nothing in our table. Yeah, we get an empty array. But let's just continue. It's gonna work out. Hopefully it's gonna work out. Now let's loop over our jobs array and let's create a create array. What do I mean by that? So how do we loop over it? We loop over it by saying jobs array dot for each job. For each job, we want to do something. For each job, we want to check whether a job already exists. So if unique URLs dot includes job dot URL, let's actually console log the jobs array so we can see okay, yeah, this is not, doesn't work like this. So let's see what lives in these objects. And here we have a URL. Yeah, so job.url should work. If unique URLs, our unique includes our job URL, do something. No, if it's not the case, then do something. So if the URL doesn't exist in the table yet, then we create it. And it's much better to sort of create an update array or a create array, which we're then using with the create records async function that Airtable the Airtable API provides, then creating one record at a time in a for each loop, which can crash easily and lead to a couple of issues. So let's define. Actually, we can use const create array, and this is just an empty array above here, and here we say create array dot push. So we're sort of adding, if the unique URL, if the URL does not exist in the table at this moment, then we're adding something to that array. Yeah, and what do we add there? Let's check the documentation for it. The create records async is what we want to use in order to create those records. And how does create records async work? You can always try to understand this or the text, or you just go into the example, which for me is at least for me is a lot easier. And as you can see, we say await. There's a table create records async, and then here is an array in there, and then the array has objects and fields, and the fields are another object. So okay, we need to, every item of that array is an object, and then we need to define the fields, and this is another object. And now we have 3 fields in our table, and those 3 fields we also want to fill. So the first thing we want to fill is we want to say the job title is the job.title. and the URL is the job.url, and the date published, I think that's how it's called, is date published. That's sort of the array we want to create. Let's console log that. Let's see how it looks like. We should get an array with 50 items. Let's remove our first console log here. It's easier to see. Yeah, we get an array with 50 items, and it's an object, and there's the fields object in there, and with our three fields, with our three field names. Let's create the records. How that works, we see here, await, jobs table it's called, create records async, and then we already formatted the array that we need to pass there, so just of the create array. Let's run this and see if it works. Test run successfully. Let's go back to our table. There we go. Like, a lot of jobs have been published today. Today is the 15th of June. But there are also some that are a bit older. There's even one from the 23rd of May. If I delete the last 5 and run this again, only the last 5 should be created, because the rest we're not creating because the URL already exists. So let's hope that that works. Let's see. It does work. We have 50 again. Perfect. So yeah, that's how you are basically adding, based on UpWork's RSS feed, how you're adding UpWork jobs automatically every 15 minutes to Airtable. And then of course you can take that, you can create an automation, you can send an email, you can send a Slack message, you can do whatever you want to do. Maybe you're just happy having that data within Airtable. But yeah, you can automate further, of course. Now, the bonus for those of you who don't have an Airtable Pro account, therefore you can't use scripts within automations, we can use a scripting app, because that is available on the free account. So actually, let's take that script. Let's go into apps. Let's add a scripting app. Let's paste it here and let's try it out. Oh, there's an error. We failed to fetch. There's a course error, which is because the scripting app runs in the browser. So it's trying to make that call from the browser, which is not allowed, or which in this case, this URL or the API doesn't allow. So luckily, Airtable has something for us, which is called remote fetch async, which basically means it's trying to do the same thing, but just from the Airtable service. If we do that, then it takes a long time, and probably it worked. We still see 50. Let's do the same thing we did before, where we delete 5 and we run it again, and we just see where that adds. It does add. So the last 5 have been added again. So that's sort of how you can create, how you can still work with this if you don't have a Pro account. Of course, you can automate it, so you have to run this manually every time, but it still works. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope this helps you to get more jobs in the end on UpWork. I make sure to add the script in the show notes, the link to that RSS to JSON feed converter, and anything else that might be interesting for you. Hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the show notes below. Let me know if you have any questions, and see you next time.